All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Open Door Fellowship, the Unchurched. We've been meeting for the last several weeks, and we've been talking about a new ministry, a new idea, a new way of thinking about church, and a new way of going about doing church. And we call it the Unchurched because the idea behind it is, of course, we're going to equip people within the context of the church to be able to go out and reach out to those folks that are the unchurched, people that are outside the church. And of course, we're not talking about getting people to come to a local church. If you'll remember, let me go back to my little artwork here. That's not very good, but it's the best artwork I've got. That's all I can tell you, is we have here the traditional church. And as I've said all along, we have had a mindset, a model of ministry that says in order for ministry to happen, we need people to come here, to come to the church. So out here we have the unchurched, and we say the way to reach them is to get them to come to the church. And what I've been teaching and what I believe the unchurched is all about is the fact that we need to move away from this come to church mentality, and we need to send out, and we need to not come to church. We need to go and be the church outside the four walls, outside the context of our programs and our services and stuff. We need to actually liberate the gospel from behind the four walls as being held hostage in behind the church walls. Now we need to liberate it and get it outside the four walls of the church and to go and encounter people where they actually lived. If you look at the life of Jesus, there's instance after instance after instance where he encountered people and he taught and he ministered to people, but he didn't do it inside the context of a church building or within the context of a church program. Where did he do it? He did it as he was living his life and coming in contact with those people. He ministered to them where they were at, both spiritually and physically, but he got the gospel and he took it outside the four walls of the church and he put it into the context of their culture, their life, where they were at, and he encountered them there. We've got to get away from this mindset of come to church, come to our big event. Now, there's nothing wrong with big events. If churches want to have big concerts, if you want to have motorcycle rallies, if you want to have everything under the shining sun, if you want to have the man on the moon come and be your guest speaker, great, do that thing. But don't anticipate that by doing these come and see kind of events and using this come and see kind of mentality, don't anticipate that we're going to be reaching out and impacting the unchurched. We're not going to. Why? Because they're not going to come to church. They're not going to come to our events. They're not going to come to those things because they are not interested in the way that people used to be interested in. Now, tonight I'm going to talk about how all this comes together, what it looks like in real life, in real time, and where do we go from here? How does this work in the real world, in real life? Now, if you'll remember, I said there were three main elements. There was community, and you have to forgive my handwriting. There was community, there was discipleship, and there is application. Practical application of what we've learned through the discipleship and through the community. So, if I was going to start right here, right now, which we're going to do this in the fall here at our church, at Open Door Fellowship, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on creating this community. So how am I going to do that? If you'll remember, we talked about small group settings. We talked about small community settings. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to recruit 10 to 12, possibly even 8. Or as far as that goes, you could have 6 or 5, or you could have a smaller group as you want to have. I would strongly encourage you to not go above about 12 or 13 people because statistics and studies have shown that about 12 or 13 people are about as many people as you can engage in an active, intimate relationship at a time. So we're going to form this small group, and we're going to, for the sake of argument, we're going to say 12 people, okay? So we're going to get 12 people together to form this small community. We are going to commit, all 13 of us, 12 of us, we are going to commit to 1 year of deeply, intentionally investing our lives in one another for the purpose of preparing and discipling each other in order to put us in a better place so that we might be able to go out and reach the unchurched. 1 year. 1 year. It won't take 1 year for you to start impacting people. It'll take 1 year for the fullest extent of the equipping of the unchurched that I want to see us do. So we're going to start this community. Now, when we start our small group, we can't make the mistake. You remember the 90-10 rule. You remember the 90-10 that says 90% of all the ministry is done by 10% of the people in the church. So let's say that you step forward and you say, okay, I'm going to be a small group community leader. I'm going to form a small group community. Now, if you do that, then you have to avoid the mistake of saying, I'm going to get these folks to come and be in my community and going out and recruiting that 10%. That's not the people that you want to invite to be a part of your group. Why? Because they're already working themselves half to death at the church to begin with. There might be one or two of them that say, I'm going to give up this or I'm going to give up that in order to be a part of this community, but you have to avoid the mindset of saying, I'm going to go out and just grab this 10% because I know they'll agree to do anything, because historically they've always agreed to do anything, so I can just go ask them and they'll come be part of my group. You have to avoid doing that. You have to intentionally avoid that. Instead, consider who do you know in your life that is a believer, somebody that is, appears to be anyway, a believer, a follower of Jesus. Maybe they're not 100% active in their local church. Maybe they're not active at all in the local church, because those are the people that make up this 90% that are not involved in any kind of ministry. So we want to engage those people in this kind of community and begin to disciple them in order that they might be able to make an impact with the unchurched. So you have to think a little bit outside the box. Are there people in your church that just kind of are wallflowers, that aren't really engaged in anything? Maybe those would be some of the people to talk to. Maybe you want to look for people that have a common theme, a common idea about things that you have. Don't allow this to become a social group. Don't just go get a bunch of people that play golf like you do to go hang out at the country club and play golf, and we're going to do a 15-minute devotion and call ourselves a community. That's not what we're doing. That's not the idea. This is about moving forward in the kingdom of God and reaching out to unchurched people. So you have to think outside the box as you pray about who God is going to invite to be a part of this group. So let's say you go through that process and it takes you a month or so to get 11 other people to agree. Now you've become a part of a group. So now you're going to start out with the unchurched training. And the way the unchurched training is going to be divided up is there's going to be a series of modules. These modules are going to be geared specifically for moving this group of people into that ministry. So we're going to start out, first of all, with redefining the church, which has been a whole lot about what we've done here in the unchurched. We're going to help them redefine their understanding of church. Because even when I was not involved in church, I didn't start going to church until I was 16 years old. And even then, I tell everybody I was chasing a girl. I wasn't really interested in God. I was chasing a girl. But my point is, even before I went to church, I knew that in order to be a part of church, you were supposed to go to church. And a lot of people have that mentality that don't want to be involved in this, and they don't want to participate in that. And so those might be the people that you want to look for in order that we can get them equipped. These modules are going to be broken down into things like the first one is going to be redefining church, helping them understand what we've talked about over these last few weeks. The second one is going to be the Bible 101, and it's going to be about what is the Bible? Where did it come from? Why do we call it authoritative? What's actually in it? Why do we trust it so much? What does it mean to be inspired? Those kinds of things. Then the next one is going to be how to study the Bible for yourself so that you don't have to be spoon-fed. I think this is one of the most valuable modules out of the entire unchurched training session, is how to study the Bible for yourself. Nobody ever taught me. I just figured it out over the course of time. And I think of how much grief could have been avoided in my life if somebody had just taught me how to study the Bible. There's going to be modules on things like prayer, on gifts and fruit, gifts of the Spirit and fruits of the Spirit. And then there's going to be a module on the actual application of moving out and starting your own group. So here's how this is going to work. So you're going to form this community. Then we're going to move into the discipleship aspect. And what we're going to do is we're going to meet, let's say, every Tuesday night at 6:30. We're going to meet. We're going to meet starting out at my house. We might meet at the same house every week. We might rotate houses. So we're going to meet. The unchurched is going to provide a module that's going to be 15 to 20 minutes long. That is going to basically go over the information that you'll need for that week's conversation. You will have access to study material if you want it. We will have study material written so that if you're leading the group, you have questions that you can ask, things that you can talk about, activities, things like that to help you help facilitate this discipleship process. You watch this video for maybe 20 minutes. Then you're going to turn the computer off, and you're going to spend the next 40 to 45 minutes basically shepherding one another. You're going to discuss it. You're going to talk about it. You're going to teach each other. You're going to talk about contrary ideas. You're going to have this conversation where you're going to engage one another in such a way that you're deepening your community at the same time that you are being discipled. So you're going to learn about the Bible. So when you walk away from that first module, if you've done what has been asked of you to do, you've attended and everything, then when you walk away from that module, you're going to have an understanding as to why Christians say we believe we are people of the book, and this is why we believe that's important. That's why this book is different than any other book. Then, after you complete this one, you'll walk away from that saying, I don't have to have a pastor or somebody spoon feed me the Word of God. I can study it on my own. I know how to learn. I know how I learn, and I know how to learn from the Bible and go all the way through. So that's the discipleship part. So we're going to take our small group community. We're going to engage in these discipleship modules, and we're going to have 4 Tuesday nights a month. And so for 3 of them, we're going to participate in the modules. Then 1, we're going to do the application, which is the actual going out and putting hands and feet on what we're learning in our discipleship and in our community about ministering to people that are the unchurched. Now, I want to give you an example that may help you to understand this. There was a lady that's a friend of mine. When I first started talking about this, she said, I would like to do something like that. And I said, what are you interested in as far as what kind of ministry? And she said, well, I've got a couple different ideas. She said, one is I like to teach expressive dance and drama and that sort of thing in the context of a church setting. She said, I'd like to have a ministry with a whole group of girls, maybe go to the YWCA or somewhere like that, and have an entire group of young ladies that maybe are underprivileged and don't have the opportunity to pay for expensive dance classes. And I want to work with them, and in the process of that, I want to engage them in this deep relationship of community. So here's how that would work. So 3 nights a month, the group would meet together and do the discipleship. Then on the 4th night, you would host a night with those groups that she's been working with all month, and the whole group would come together and provide a meal, maybe watch those girls rehearse, maybe interact with them in some way or another, connect with them in some way or another. And that would be the practical application of the discipleship that you're learning in order to engage people right where they're at, even if they don't ever come to your church. See, we're not coming to church. We are the church. We are being the church. We're taking the gospel to a dance class and not confining it or holding it hostage behind the 4 walls of a church. Another idea she had is she said that she knew several parents that had convicted children that were serving time in prison or in the local jail. And she said we could do a group like that. Well, think about how easy that would be to facilitate this. 3 nights a month, you meet together, you do the discipleship modules. Then on the 4th night, what do? You have a night where you actually go to the jail, or you go to the prison, or you have a day where you go to the prison and you actually visit and interact with those folks. You help those families prepare if their loved one is going to get paroled soon. You start helping them prepare for the possibility of that person coming out of incarceration and being able to come and be a part of the community and give them opportunities to move back into a somewhat of a normal life as a productive member of society. So you see how this was set up. And the thing is, this model will apply to whatever your passion is. I've brought up homeless people. That's my wife's passion. Homelessness, this is a simple fix. You do 3 nights of discipleship. One night you go to the Salvation Army and you serve supper and you hang out with the homeless people there and you get to know them. Or you do like one of my friends, Cara, and you go take food to people that live under bridges and you get to know them on a first name basis. And you begin to get to know things about them that you can only learn by engaging them in community. So I hope you get an idea of how cyclical this whole thing is. You engage in community, you disciple, you get discipled in order to be able to go out and reach the unchurched through the application. And then what do? Then you engage them in community and in discipleship. And you go from being a person that's an evangelist, you go from being the evangelized into being the evangelist. And that's how that process gets most completed. So at the end of a year, let's say you've done this, you've done all the modules, you've had 12 or more, and that's up to the group, 12 or more opportunities to go out and literally apply in a practical way what you've learned. So then what happens? If you have 12 people, here's what I would like to see happen. You have 12 people, and at the end of a year, you have 3 groups of 4 that go out and start the process all over again. They can do this, or they can do other training modules. I have people that I've talked to that would be interested in participating in this ministry that would like to teach a module. I've got one lady that went through a horrible, ugly divorce, and I said, she was talking about wanting to be a part of this, and I said, maybe you could teach a class on divorce recovery. And she said, you know what I'd really rather do? And I said, what's that? And she said, you've been married for 38 years. And I said, yeah. And she said, I would rather tag team with you and teach a class on how to not get a divorce. She said, I would rather work with young couples in crisis and try to help walk them back from the edge and show them that there's another way to do things besides lead up to the point of these cataclysmic, ugly divorces. And she said, I think you and I could partner together and teach this class, one from the perspective of, I didn't get a divorce, and then me from the perspective of, I did get a divorce. And she said, I think that would be 2 different perspectives that could become one of our modules. And ideally, we'll have a web page, and we'll have all these modules available. So if at the end of a year, this group wants to deal with young couples in crisis, then they're going to spend a year with those young couples. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to be discipling them in all these ways, including practical application. So at the end of that time, those young couples can go out and start their groups as well. This basic one, the first one, where we start with redefining the church, we do the Bible, how to study the Bible, the prayer, the gifts, and everything. That's always going to be available, and I would always encourage people to consider doing that at least one time. But after that, you can choose what modules you want to engage in. If you want to take a whole group back through this whole thing again, and you lead it, more power to you. So you might have this group that's doing young couples. You might have this group that fell in love with some rural Appalachian children from very poverty-stricken homes. So that's who their group is going to be focused on. And this group over here might say, you know what, we're going to go back to the very beginning and start this process over again. So at the end of a year, these 12 people will be ready to go out and form their groups as well. It's the difference between addition and multiplication. Is it smarter for me to go out and reach 12 people a year, or is it smarter for me to go out and reach one person and teach that person how to reach other people? So let's do that. So if I reach 12 people and in 10 years I've reached 120 people, if I go out and in year 1 I reach one, but I train them. So now the 2 of us go out and reach, that's 2. So then the 2 of us go out and reach, now there's 4, then there's 8, then 16, then 32, then 64, then 128, then 256. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then there's 512. Then there's 1,024. 120 versus 1,024. You tell me which is the more effective way to reach the unchurched. It's not one at a time. It's one that's equipped to go out and reach. That's how we're going to reach the unchurched world. I believe this ministry will work whether you're in a cul-de-sac with families. I think it'll work whether you're talking about children in a once-a-week vacation Bible school kind of setting. I don't think it matters where you apply it. I say it'll work from the cul-de-sac to the jail cell. Either way, it'll work. The question is, will we invest in this? What will be required in order to make it work? Because I assure you, I've prayed over this, I've thought through this, I've talked to people about it, and one of the biggest criticisms I've gotten is they say, you're just asking a whole lot of people to commit to do this. Yeah, I am. And you know why? Because Jesus asks for a whole lot from us. And I think this is reasonable because this will change the way we do church. If we want to grow the church, we have to stop thinking bigger. We've got to start thinking smaller and more efficient, more authentic, more transparent. this will work. Guys, I am Pastor Joe. This is Open Door Fellowship, the Unchurch. If you're interested in being a part of the Unchurch, then you contact us and let us know. When you see this, there will be contact information attached to it. So please give prayer and thought to your part of being a part of the Unchurch. And let's reach these people that God has a heart for. Thank you, and I hope you're blessed.